Okay, hello. This is a meeting of the Esoteric Book Club on the Emerald Tablets, Alchemy for Personal Transformation by Dennis William Hawk. We're reading over, not reading, but we're talking about chapters 18 and 19 today. And we will start out with the astrology for today, the week, just things that are popping out. Go ahead and share the screen. So Saturn's direct, woohoo. And it also went direct really close to the south node, almost conjunct, which of course I think is screaming like atoning for some sort of karma, or like overcoming a past karmic thing, letting go of old paths that we may have been journeying on, or career opportunities, or the direction that we thought we were going in life, with Saturn hitting that south node and making a direct turn in the sky now. It's almost as if he was saying, okay, forget all the shit that you thought that you were going to do the last couple of months. We're going to move forward with the plans that we originally talked about. And so it can feel like you're picking up where you left off from a couple months ago, that all the plans that you wanted to get done or do, or productivity that you thought you were going to accomplish was not really accomplishable for some reason or whatever. Maybe you just felt lack of passion, maybe you just felt a lack of direction, or a lack of foresight with goal setting. And with Saturn retrograde, especially in Capricorn, we can end up feeling that way. And it's a further planet, and their retrograde phases do, of course, make an impact on us. But I'm just wondering for you, Analisa, for example, like how did this Saturn retrograde period affect you more so than the closer personal planets? Or maybe it didn't, or maybe it's just not comparable.
Well, it's funny because I feel like a bad astrologer in the sense that, like, I kind of forgot that even though I was writing about the astrology every week, at least in terms of my personal self, I forgot that Saturn was retrograde and moving back kind of towards my natal Saturn, because literally May, like Saturn went retrograde the 29th, 30th, May, that entire month, like everything flipped over. Like I started having just awful stuff happen. And then the entire summer, I just felt like I couldn't get anything locked down. Like I was just totally all over the place. And yeah, everything you said, like in terms of me lacking direction or stability or passion, all Saturn kind of themes in a retrograde kind of way were happening, but I wasn't attributing it to Saturn. I was attributing it to other things going on in my chart. And then when Saturn went direct and I was writing about it at the beginning of the week, I had this whole like aha moment, because now with the orb of Saturn kind of moving back into that perceived direct motion, I'm revisiting all the stuff that I was focused on at the beginning of the year. And I had this whole like, oh my God, like Saturn, you asshole, it was you the entire time. And I felt like a bad astrologer because I had been like, my Saturn return's over. I'm not feeling Saturn anymore. Like I learned those lessons or whatever. And I was like, no, like my scatteredness this whole summer was attributed to that. So yeah, I'm feeling like the direct motion is totally, the perceived direct motion is definitely making me feel re-inspired and back on track in a lot of ways that I wasn't able to lock down pretty much the moment it went retrograde. But I just wasn't really paying attention to it because it's a further away planet. Like I don't put as much stock into it in my consciousness. And now after having this experience, I feel like I'm gonna think I'm going to pay more attention to Saturn when it goes retrograde, just after the way it affected me, because I just wasn't looking at it like at all in that
Mhm.
way. What
Definitely.
about you?
Yeah, I mean, I just started talking about my career aspirations today after having not thought about them for months and putting them on the back burner and just letting it sit there, like, oh yeah, that's a dream that I wanted to do, but just letting it kind of ferment in itself and not really taking any action on them. And then today the topic came up again. I'm like talking with you about it earlier before we started recording, with certain goals that I have, maybe for the end of the year, to do something very big with my career and do something very scary and jump forward with some career goals that I have. And Jupiter's conjunct my Saturn in my second house right now. So I feel like it's a very attainable goal, but of course with my Saturn in the second, it's telling me like, well, you have to get all of your shit in the row first. You have to get all of your ducks in a row. You have to make sure that all of your paper trail is clean, like everything looks good, because Saturn is the tax man. I mean, that's just, and then probably Pluto has some play in that as well. But yeah, when it comes to taxes, and it's in my second house, Saturn is, then it just shows that, like, for me, whatever I do with my career, I have to make sure that my shit is clean, because I know that with Saturn in the second, like, if I slip up, it's just Saturn won't let me slip up. So yeah, that's been the biggest indication. I'm just like, oh my god, I can't believe I just started talking about this today after not having thought about it for months. And yeah, obviously it's because Saturn went direct today. It was in a shadow period of going stationary. So it's not a shadow period, but it's just called when it's going stationary. And when planet goes stationary, it means that it's that moment of right before it starts to move forward. And so it looks like it's staying still and then it moves forward. That's just called stationary. It's not a shadow period. And I don't really believe in shadow periods for retrogrades. I think once it's forward, it's forward. Maybe that's like a human psych kind of thing, where if it's in your psyche of that being the way the energy was, then it's still present in your psyche now or something. I don't know, but I don't really look much at shadow periods, because then with shadow periods with Mercury going retrograde and direct all the time, then basically Mercury would constantly be in a shadow period or retrograde if we were counting like 2 to 3 weeks of shadow before and after a retrograde. That's kind of crazy. So yeah, what else? Mercury and Venus went into Libra. How have you been feeling that, Anna?
Yeah, I really associate, for me at least, Libra energy when the moon's in Libra, and when we have a lot of planets in Libra, I always get in like study mode. It's a very bookworm energy for me, and so I just feel like with Saturn stationing direct and the Libra energy in the consciousness, I feel like I'm just starting to feel disciplined in my studies. I'm one of those people that likes to read like 5 books at a time, and I just haven't had the I haven't wanted to. Like, it's very abnormal for me to not want to do that. And I feel like I've just been focusing on our book club book and haven't really had too much bandwidth for anything else. And I feel like once Mercury and Venus moved into Libra, I started feeling that need to like expand my learning more again. And I have Venus in my 9th house in Libra, so Venus was conjunct my Venus when it stationed, because I have Venus at 1 degree Libra in the 9th. So I really enjoy that energy, because it kind of makes me feel like I'm wanting to kind of just hermit in a way that's fun for me, for my brain. So yeah. And then also when it goes kind of near my midheaven, which it will be pretty soon, I feel like I'll get re-inspired to maybe update my website, which I've been thinking about doing for a while. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I love it.
We have the moon just went into Gemini a couple hours ago, about 3 hours ago. So that's the next 2.5 days of a Gemini moon. So feeling social, feeling chatty, feeling witty, feeling fun. And then it moves into Cancer about 2 days after that, and it's going to hit the North Node in Cancer. And so going to activate some aha moments for our emotional needs and our family needs and what they need and what we need, and making a balance between all of that. If anyone's been dealing with family issues or been feeling drained from your family, that'll be a great moment to kind of get a refresher, like recalibrate what you need to do for yourself. Let's see, that'll be that's a really quick little blip, but it's September 22nd at 11:31 p.m. And then it'll be opposite Pluto, so then we'll have a flood of emotions. We'll probably overcome some hurts from the past. We'll probably open up some wounds or talk about things that have been buried deep with your family or familial topics, and get over it. And then the moon will go back into Leo, and then we'll have fun, and then get FOMO for everything, and then leave the nodes to do their other work. So let's see, is there anything else popping out for you?
Well, we had that exact square between Sag and Neptune recently again.
Sure.
And I can't remember what day it was exact, but it was like within the last couple days. And so I feel like if you're feeling dreamy or foggy or ungrounded, or like you just want to get out and explore or meditate or reach new levels of consciousness, I feel like that square, it can be pretty prominent for mutable people like me and people that have issues with reality or mundane reality. I think it's good that Saturn is direct now because it kind of helps anchor within that. So this is kind of a good time. I always see like when we have all this like Neptune influence mixed with a strong earth influence, the way it always makes me feel is that we're manifesting and creating our reality right now. So our thoughts and our will and our dreams and everything that we're kind of connecting with in the fabric of the universe, like it's picking up what we're laying down. And so we're weaving our future right now with all of our actions. And I think like those of us that are consciously manifesting right now, I think of the 9 of Cups energy for that square. If I know squares are tension, but through the tension we can create a lot. So I think like the 9 of Cups is either Venus in Pisces or Jupiter in Pisces. And so Jupiter in Sag squaring Neptune in Pisces, it's the kind of like ask and you shall receive energy. And then with Saturn direct, what?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the wishing card in the tarot. And I feel like those squares are hard, like they're not easy, and they kind of, the realizations that we have to have in order to get to that dream that we're trying to go towards, there's usually harsh lessons in those squares, but it's through those lessons that we are able to accomplish the dream. And I think that if we're able to heed the wisdom of each planet and not get too caught up in what the angle symbolizes, and just say like, okay, well, what are the obstacles that will be obvious, and how do I solve the problem? Like, what's the solution to the problem? Then we can navigate that energy in a productive way rather than just feeling like we're at the whim of the celestial forces, even if we are somewhat. But yeah, I feel like it's a good time for manifesting your reality and learning what you need to learn right now so that you can actually start putting that stuff into action since Saturn is direct now.
Jupiter and Neptune in their own signs, like they're in their signs that they rule, and they're both mutable, and they're both the quintessential like religious meets spiritual. And so for this tight square, which is going to be really quick, actually it's only going to last for maybe less than an hour, because Neptune's retrograde, and so it's doubly applying into a square. So this is going to be a really quick, forceful kind of awakening, and then be gone on September 21st around 9:30 a.m. And one thing that comes to mind for me specifically with this aspect is definitely publications. The false fake news is definitely the square. I think that there's going to be a bubble that bursts where we're really not going to be able to believe anything that comes out from news media, news sources. Like, you thought you had a reliable source, now you won't after this.
I never feel that way.
It's going to be so hard to believe, like, and it may even be news that's so hard to believe that you can't believe that it's true. And so that could also be the square where it like tears at your moral fiber to the fact that you can't even believe it. Like, there's no way that this can even be true. Like, no way. And that's belief in truth and seeking truth and seeking connection with source in some way. So I just feel like, one, there's probably going to be a big reveal with religious organizations. There have already been a few at this point, but I think there's going to be more to come. And there's kind of like there's a big shift happening with religious organizations and spiritual connection to source. It's like they're working on leveling it out or something. Something's being leveled out. We have a Mars in Virgo making an aspect to this too. And then right when this exact square happens, the moon will be hitting Mars, making a square. And so this is a feeling of urgency too that comes about with the square, and it's immutable as well. So anxiety and urgency over something that needs to change and shift in our personal lives, but also with the community and religious organizations and the way that our moral fibers conditioned. So big shifts.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There's been so much of that going on.
Okay, so let's get into book club. So chapter 18. In chapter 18, we talk about the 4 elements and their participation in the Emerald Tablets, and how we can utilize the 4 elements within our body to adjust certain emotional, psychological, and physical experiences that we have. And this is not unfamiliar to anyone who has studied Chinese medicine or Reiki or astrology or tarot. The 4 elements are in everything, and it's kind of the foundation for a lot of healing modalities. And so the chapter 18 is about health and longevity. And so we're talking about the 4 elements and why these 4 elements, or how they associate to our body, and what their humor is. So, like, or what their temperature or temperance is. I don't know what to call it. Like, but they each have hot, dry, hot, moist, cold, dry. I don't know what that's called, but each of the elements are called humors. And they all govern different parts of the way that we relate to our external world and our internal world. So the fire humor is the thinking, is associated with thinking, and it's hot and dry. And the substance within the body with the fire humor is red bile. It is sardonic. It is a bitter temperament, and it causes chloraic, which I don't know what that is. Too much fire can equal twitching, excitable, headstrong, impatient, angry. A balanced fire within someone is energetic, insightful, inventive, and I threw in generous because that's just the way I perceive the fire signs when they're all really nice and happy and balanced. So for the air humor is the association for that is intuiting, and it's a hot, moist association. I want to figure out what they're called. I don't know. Anyway, it's hot and moist. The substance is blood, and it causes down-to-earth, sanguine, salty temperament. In an imbalanced person, they'll have a ruddy complexion, blush easily, live in ungrounded fantasy worlds. A balanced air will have lively, optimistic, and communicative tendencies. I think also like the ability to navigate socially is within that too. Because just astrologically, when someone doesn't have a lot of air, then there tends to be a more difficult time just navigating social situations and social circumstances from what I've seen. The water humor, which is feeling, is cold and moist. The substance is phlegm and mucus. It causes within someone to be innocent, have a sweet temperament, and be phlegmatic. Too much water, the person will have like a runny nose, teary eyes, appear sluggish, callous, outwardly unemotional. A balanced water person will have great empathy, be very understanding, and have deep flowing feelings. They can access their feelings more easily. Earth humor is sensory, and it's cold and dry. The substance is black bile. It causes melancholic, sour temperament. So notice those keywords too: salty, bitter, sour, because that also equates with in Ayurvedic medicine, the way that you eat food, the types of food that you're attracted to, and then sweet. So that's all the 4 different flavors as well: sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. Because sometimes you crave sweet, sometimes you crave salty at different times of the month or the year or the day. Too much earth can cause someone to have diarrhea, be pessimistic, brooding, have a brooding disposition. A balanced earth is practical, down to earth, kind, and loving. The imbalance with the 4 humors causes dis-ease. And then we go into this, we start talking about this guy, Paracelsus.
So I found this article on him from the New World Encyclopedia just because I was kind of curious about just reading more about him, I guess. It's kind of similar to the book, but Paracelsus, they talk about in the book, and in this article, they kind of condense it. He was a Swiss alchemist, physician, astrologer, and philosopher. His real name that he was born with is crazy. I'm not even sure I'm going to pronounce it right, but it's Theophrastus Philippus Aureolus Bombastus von Hohenheim. That's his whole name.
Yes, von Hohenheim.
I think it's kind of amazing. He took the name Paracelsus later in life, meaning beside or similar to Celsus, an early Roman physician. And they say that they're saying beside or similar to Celsus. I think in this book and in some of the other articles I was reading, it meant greater than Celsus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they're being nice in this article because I think he was like making a statement with his name, basically saying that his studies and his education was greater than those who had been before him. During his travels in Egypt, Arabia, and the Holy Land, he observed the methods of physicians, chemists, and spiritual healers there and applied this experience to his own research. Rejecting the theories of Galen, which had been the foundation of European medicine during the Middle Ages, Paracelsus taught instead that health depended on nature as the one, a living organism, and believed in the natural healing power present in nature and the human body. A physician, he said, must have wisdom and certain spiritual qualities in order to be able to cure his patients, being endowed with no less compassion and love than God extends toward man. All knowledge could be discovered by intuition, searching within the human mind, because man was a microcosm of the universe, and the principles operating within the universe operated in a corresponding way within man. His aggressive manner of teaching and his outspoken criticism of traditional medical theory made him unwelcome in medieval universities, and only recently have his contributions to medicine been recognized. He pioneered the use of chemistry in medicine, developed the use of mercury to cure syphilis, recognized the role of minerals in certain illnesses, and coined the word alcohol and named the element zinc. And then this article goes more into his life and his works and his thoughts. They say that he was also considered some people considered him to be a magician because of his connection with alchemy and astrology, but he himself rejected supernatural magic and instead emphasized the magical healing powers with which God had endowed nature. I think it's interesting, like a side note, when I was looking up articles, I read some articles that seemed to be kind of wrong in their perception of him. Like there was one article that was saying how he was really into fairies and like spirituality in a way that was supernatural. And reading Dennis Hawk's book, that is not what I got at all from how Dennis Hawk was talking about him. It was like he was very much he was kind of sick of the folklore within medicine and was trying to be more scientific and not be so fanatical. So I thought that was kind of interesting that people, even nowadays on the internet, tend to have kind of skewed perceptions on who he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that a lot too when I was looking at some research just on deities on Wikipedia. It's really up for interpretation of the individual who's writing it. Mm-hmm. And so Jupiter square Neptune,
Right.
like you can't really trust what anyone's motive is when it comes to writing, because they're going to have their own motive and you may or may not know that. And so you kind of have to like really go with your intuition and trust that, not the egoic wanting something to be right, but like truly on a deeper level, trust certain information and not others. But he was born in 1498 in Switzerland, by the way. So he was around during that time, and during that time, medicine was very and still kind of is in a way, but back then it was really it was external of the human body, and there was a very strong fear of poisons and elements and like drugs, and he actually figured out that what ails someone, adding that into their into their body or bloodstream by small doses can actually cure them of what ails them. So like cures like is a term that he coined for the fact that he would get, like, how a vaccine works. It's essentially how vaccines work, is that, you introduced the virus into the body in order to allow the body to, I mean, I'm going to butcher this. I don't exactly know the exact science, but from what I understand, you inject the body with the virus, and so that it kind of gets used to it, and then the virus doesn't have a chance to contaminate the body anymore.
Yeah, they do it with allergies too now. Like they'll,
Yeah.
like if you have a gluten allergy, or a peanut allergy, they'll make you start eating small amounts, because the way that your gut will adapt to the enzymes of your stomach, and the cells in your gut will adapt to be able to process the pathogen or the food or the allergy. Like it'll change. So they'll say a lot of times, like the way that you can think of the gut, that I think is also how we can think of the human body, is like a chemistry experiment that you can kind of morph and adapt, that it'll adapt to whatever it kind of needs to do, if that makes sense. So like we can change the chemistry of our gut to be more in line with something that is hurting us if we need to. It makes sense why we're able to survive for so long, like literally putting poison like alcohol and drugs and cigarettes in our bodies for so long, because our body will adapt to host it.
Want to go back to him and the way he's represented. This is the dude. This is him. This is the guy. Paracelsus. The word bombastic comes from him because he was rude. He was highly egotistical. I mean, he even, his name Paracelsus, like you were saying before, greater than Celsius. Like, so he got a reputation of just being a dick, and like that's kind of the base of somebody you want to punch, and that's him. But he like he granted us a lot of knowledge, and I guess the character of a man sometimes can't be judged because of the intelligence that they bring. But I don't know. This is who he is. He also brought to us the idea that the essence of elements can be removed by parts of the body, that the body can actually flush or digest or whatever it does elements. And so we started to associate elements with parts of the body. He said that the lungs can remove the essence of air. I mean, they're all things that make sense to us already. Like kidneys remove the essence of water. The stomach removes the essence of earth. And the brain removes the essence of fire. And so those are all parts of the body that are pretty much associated with those elements. And it makes sense, right? Lungs and air, stomach and food, that's the digestion, and the head and fire. That's kind of how we expel fire. Like your face gets red with rage. What does it say here? For Paracelsus, the elements were like vibrations or modes of manifestation, vertical lines, vertical links with universal prototypes. And so he felt that the elements were like modalities, and that's kind of the way that we read it in astrology too, that each element has a modality to it. Each element has a direction that the energy goes in, which is represented by the different astrological signs. So there's like forward movement, fixed, mutable for each of the elements, and that creates the 12 signs of the zodiac. So there's 3 parts of the lower triangle within the body that speaks to the different types of processes of alchemy, and they're called the 3 crucibles. And the 3 crucibles are, the lowest is the cauldron, and it's in the belly, and that is connected to calcination and dissolution. It's of the primal energy Qing. Middle is solar plexus and diaphragm, fermentation, and qi. The highest is the head, around the pineal gland. It's distillation, shen. Copulation of the masculine and feminine happens here. Even though later it says that it happens in the heart. So I feel like there's a lot of parts of the body floating around, and in the book I just noticed that it wasn't 100% consistent, but I trust the 7 chakra system. So the 3 crucibles, Qing, Qi, Shen, then is also a different Chinese medicine association, and they have 5 elements too, so they have somewhat of different representations for different parts of the body with their elements. One interesting quote that I wrote down is, coagulation begins when an ambrosia flows from the pineal gland to the pituitary gland and accumulates like saliva in the mouth. I just thought, what a cool experience to maybe have.
I know, I was curious when I read that. I was like thinking about it, and I was like, when he says it accumulates like a saliva in the mouth, but it's not in the mouth, it's like in that part of the head. Right? Like he's just comparing it to the experience of saliva in the mouth, right?
Accumulates like saliva in the mouth. Yeah, you're right.
I'm like, what is that? Because I've had experiences that, like, the word ambrosia feels like I could use that word to describe the experience, but would I compare it to saliva in the mouth? No. So then it makes me feel like I have never experienced what that must be, and then it's very mysterious sounding to me. Like, what is that? What does saliva feel like in my brain, not being on a hallucinogen?
I know, I don't know. I don't think you'd feel it, right?
I don't know. That's what I was so curious about. That's why it feels mysterious.
Well, I can say that we've been filtering out fluoride from our water for the last few months, and I'm hoping that it's helping my pineal glands.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Less calcified. And maybe I'll feel it and I'll let you know.
Please do.
Oh, I like the homunculus and the parulus theme in the book. Do you remember that? It's like a really quick little thing, but it just talks about this little child of yours that you have, and they call it homunculus.
That was a trip to me.
Oh, it says, there, the subtle lights impregnate the swallowed ambrosia and create a psychophysical fetus, or crystal child, what Western alchemists would have called the homunculus, little man, or parvulus, little boy. And I kind of have been going crazy with this book lately because of the fact of how fucking patriarchal it is. And like just the just like using the word man instead of human, and he instead of the person, or like it's just so divisive to me as
Right.
a woman reading this book, which is supposed to be universal for every single person, is written in the perspective of a man, and that bothers me. And so I just wanted to say that I was feeling that way about this book lately.
It's funny because I normally feel that way about a lot of books that I read, and for some reason I feel like with this one I'm not getting that as much, but maybe just because I associate alchemy with such a masculine, like it's such a masculine dominated thing, right? Like all that we've talked about it in previous book clubs that haven't been recorded, but you've talked about it a lot, which I really appreciated, is like how women weren't really included in this, like throughout all these years, and how we weren't even allowed to read this knowledge, you know? And I feel like I don't even realize half the time that I'm not included because I'm so used to not being included. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, like I'm so used to this conversation being so masculine that I'm forgetting to be offended that I'm not being represented. But I felt that way like when I was reading a lot of the older written astrology books. Like I've definitely felt that way. But yeah, I think it's a really good thing to point out because this book is newer. It's not as old as some of these astrology books that I've read that are doing this that I've been irritated about. And I think it's definitely something that us as, like, since our book club is predominantly female as far as I know in terms of who's joined the group, I feel like in terms of our who's come into the chats when we've been on here, I think everyone identifies as female that's come in so far. And I feel like there's so many women that are interested in this path and this knowledge, but yeah, like how are we supposed to know how we fit into it when it's not like we're not really being included in the conversation.
Yeah, it gets me sometimes, and I look at Paracelsus's face, and then it just makes me want to punch something. Like this guy.
Yeah. Well, it's like that with science and medicine. Like women really weren't a part of that in the Western culture and the Eastern. Like we've just been kind of getting the
Yeah.
stick for a long time. So Iyengar, this is a little off topic, but it's another big movement like in the yoga world. But Iyengar, who's like one of the top yogi people in Western, yoga culture, like his books are also super sexist, like just straight up, like there's stuff that he says about women being like temptations away from your discipline in your practice, and how the like perfect like yogi master like stays away from women. Like there's stuff like that in that book, and it was so hard for me when I'm like trying to learn yoga and I want to know the history of yoga to like read these books and feel like I want to keep studying it,
Yeah.
So we gotta definitely recognize that, I guess, more as we are an esoteric book club, and then change that in history right now.
Yeah. Because if Dennis William Hawke ever hears this for some wild reason, I just want it to be known that there's actual moments where I've been offended because of the word he and man. And it feels like that the author is specifically talking to men. And I also had this problem when I was even younger, and it's never gone away. I've always had this problem with literature, and I don't accept it's just supposed to represent humans as in general. Like, no, if it was supposed to represent humans in general, then write humans.
Right.
You're like, it doesn't make sense then if you refer to she and her specifically in she and her moments.
Right.
And then he and man for every other moment. That's obviously sexist. And yeah, so when it comes to the homunculus, then I don't know what the equivalent would be to a non-little man, like a little person. I don't know. That's basically where I'm going with this.
We all have a little man inside of us, Evelyn.
I guess so. I don't know. I guess if I want to read it literally, then yeah.
You're gonna have a little man come out.
Yeah.
Inside of you.
I have a little man inside of me, and I hope he doesn't look like Paracelsus. Be angry.
I hope that too for us both.
Oh my gosh. Okay, page 302. The stone that is no stone. Oh, a paradox.
I loved this chapter.
Well, you tell me what you like about this part of the chapter then.
Well, I just felt like it started to, like, I think when I've heard about the Philosopher's Stone and when we started the book, it was still mysterious to me. And I feel like now, after reading so much and getting to this part in this chapter, I felt like I finally was starting to have a more full understanding of what alchemy is and what the goal is and what the stone is, and kind of feeling like, okay, like I understand more of what this whole experience is about, rather than at the beginning of the book where we're talking about the Philosopher's Stone and still being like, okay, like it's spiritual in nature, but I'm still kind of not really sure what they're talking about. And now, yeah, it just kind of tied it together in a way that I like. Let me think if there's anything. It's not proper to say much about the Philosopher's Stone or to boast about its possession, Paracelsus cautioned. The ancients have indicated the recipe for those who have true understanding. However, they use parables to keep unworthy persons from knowing and misusing it. The symbols that alchemists used in their parables included hailstones, meteorites, gold coins, a golden egg, androgynous youths or angels, salt, a heavenly scented balsam, and the elixir or ambrosia, food of immortality. In the tarot, the properties of the stone are depicted by the sun, world, judgment, and wheel of fortune cards. These symbols all suggest a consummation of powerful energies that result in the perfection of matter. I think that was partially what I liked about it too, since I do tarot so in depth, that I like it when he brings the cards into it, because then it kind of opens up that next layer of understanding. But especially with the world, judgment, and wheel of fortune cards, because on an intuitive level, and maybe I've read somewhere, I always feel like those cards connect together in the way that they show up, and they show up a lot of times in the same readings. So seeing that those three cards especially connected to the stone made sense to me. I'm trying to see if there's anything else.
So at this point, I'm kind of leaning towards the stone being the process of the pineal gland opening up. How do you feel about that?
I could see that. I feel like the stone to me is a little more heart-centered than just that, but I feel like that would be an obvious part of, like, I feel like that all goes together. Like, I think of so they talk about how there's the line between what world you're working through. You're either operating in the upper half or in the lower half, and I feel like the stone is when you're operating in the upper half. So I would think that the pineal gland opening would be like an obvious part of obtaining the stone, but I feel like it would require that whole upper half triangle being activated, and then I feel like you're operating within the upper triangle when the stone is obtained and activated consciously, and it's this upper triangle whole thing that is aligned, and the pineal gland would definitely be a part of that for sure. And that's probably why the ambrosia, like I feel like that ambrosia is definitely related to the pineal gland.
Yeah.
For
It's
sure.
it's a product of the stone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, let's see, what does he say that it's a it's a it's a thing that exists but doesn't exist. um, if you wish to succeed in such a work, you must separate spirit and life and nature, and you make the astral soul in yourself tangible. Then the substance of your soul will appear visibly. Thus, the stone, the salt of the alchemist, is the same thing sought by the Taoists, the glorified second body that participates throughout the vertical axis of reality within the Ouroboros fountain of fountains. And I feel like maybe this isn't as mysterious as this book makes it out to be. Like, I really do feel that people who are attuned to Reiki, Feng Shui, um, Ayurveda, yoga, Kundalini, have already accomplished um, acquiring the stone within themselves, because it does require a level of physical, mental, and spiritual obedience and practice and temperament and like refined skill. And I think especially with things like Reiki, where they're moving energy around in other people, that is like, to me, like, I think that's that's the level of masterhood, where you're able to understand the elements and the energies and how they work in the human body, and then manipulate them to bend at your will, so to speak. I feel like that's true magic and true alchemy as well. And I think that we're all participating in alchemy on a constant basis. And so I hope that when people are reading through this book and went through the 7 steps, they realize that, oh, hey, actually, I think I am a lot farther on my path than I thought I was. Or I'm realizing that I don't really have a whole lot of work to do, but the fact of practice and strengthening the skills that you already have is something that has come up. Because for me, this book is really inspired, especially reading this chapter and the next chapter has really inspired me to get, I mean, I'm pretty serious about it, but even more so with the, my external being, my internal. I think that diet is one of the hardest things for a lot of people to overcome. And diet is the number one way that you nurture the 4 elements within you with the different types of foods that you eat. So if you eat excessive salty foods or excessive sweet foods, then you're putting that in your cauldron to be digested in a way that may be imbalanced for your body. And then the imbalance starts like right then and there. So what else? Oh, Flamel. This guy Flamel. Do you remember this guy?
Yeah, I liked that part a lot too. I was really kind of blown away by that story.
I was too, and I was also kind of like, really?
I know. It reminded me of like reading the Anne Rice vampire books, which I was very into when I was.
You reminded me of a vampire too.
Yeah, I was like, maybe this is where because Anne Rice is like super into the occult and Egypt and Greeks, like all that stuff. And I was like, I wonder if like she read about all these alchemists and that was like how she got her ideas for her vampires. Because that was totally what this made me think of.
I was thinking that too about this guy, Nicholas Flamel. I kind of always just, I mean, I kind of doze off during stories of great people who live to be hundreds of years old and somehow keep a low profile while doing it and like perform miracles and like evolve humanity and society in various ways, but then like is not known in history for that. Like, I don't know. It just kind of reminds me of another Jesus story too, where you're like, did really though? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, supposedly people see like Saint Germain on Mount Shasta, and that's where he is. Who knows? I really want
Mm,
to go to Mount Shasta though and see if I
mm-hmm.
have any transcendental experiences.
No, I have to go there too. I passed it up so many times on road trips.
I know. I've driven past it so many times and never been.
Mm-hmm. So Voltaire says of Nicholas Flamel, he is the greatest philosopher I know. A man who never dies, never seems to age, and who knows everything. the
Goals.
last
Those are my goals.
The last sighting on record was in the late 19th century when Saint Germain told a French historian that he was going to England to work on the steam engine and then to America to apply his knowledge to the building of railroads. Oh, so Voltaire was talking about Saint Germain. Saint Germain, as you were saying, was another one of these mystical figures who apparently lived to be hundreds of years old. Nicholas Flamel, let's see, it says his transformation began in 1357. He acquired a strange alchemy book written by Abraham Eleazar, a wandering Jewish alchemist who wrote at least one other book, the Book of Hieroglyphics, that is still on display in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Flamel said his book was written on leaves of tree bark, and on every seventh page, one of three symbols was inscribed: a caduceus, a crucified serpent, or the scene of a snake-infested desert with wonderful fountains. Um, so this is kind of the introduction to the caduceus, which we go much more in depth on the symbolism and the symbolic breakdown of each part of the caduceus in chapter 19. But do you have anything else to add about Flamel? I wasn't so excited about him.
I mean, that stuff excites me. I don't fall asleep during those types of stories. Maybe it's my Pisces moon. I get very into like, I want to believe. I don't necessarily, but I want to. I was very intrigued. I don't know. I find it curious, the longevity part of alchemy. Like, I wonder, is it really literal, the living forever part? Like, is that really something like the immortality in the human form? Because the way that I perceive immortality is not within the human form, it's within
Mm-hmm.
our our consciousness, but in more of the ethereal body. And so when I read these things about the human longevity, I feel confused, because I feel like the Philosopher's Stone and the like immortality part is more like the resurrection story of Jesus, and but in a metaphorical sense, that like our soul is immortalized, but in a way that we're
Mm-hmm.
like an ascended master. And I've read books about the various progressions of the soul in terms of what the names are associated with souls that are wiser than other souls, like the way that the evolution of the soul takes place after death, and then when we choose to like come back to the human realm and what that means. Like, there's a bunch of other books and theories about that. So I feel like I still have a lot of questions about the alchemical longevity of immortality. Like, what is the goal with this specific process with the emerald tablet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those questions for me around people like Flamel, I'm like, was that really the goal of alchemy though? Was to just be a vampire? I thought it was like bigger than that.
Yeah. Unless it took that individual that long to do the work that they were meant to do.
Yeah.
Or something. But yeah, I don't see a point in just dilly-dallying around Earth plane for 200 years unless you have a great plan that you're trying to establish. And even if you're a wealthy person, it's just a waste of time and space. Like, I just want to live forever so I can play with my millions. It just is dumb. Like,
Yeah.
do something else. I don't know, unless you actually are using that time to. But then, see, that's the thing, right? If you've accomplished on like turning lead into gold, literal gold, and then you've accomplished understanding the 7 steps of alchemy, and then utilize that in your life, then what's the point of continuing on for 100 more years?
Yeah, that's my question. Yeah, like what's the ultimate goal of the immortality within the human form?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what supersedes that in the human form? I feel like it makes more sense to me outside of the human form if there's other dimensional steps that we're supposed to be reaching, which to my understanding there is. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, people like Nicholas Flamel, I'm curious about the perception of that in a
Yeah. I
deeper way.
wonder too if we polled men and women on a question, would you like to live forever? Like, who would say yes and who would say no? Because just in general, women have, or the feminine has, a stronger connection to death and rebirth and the regenerative process of the life cycle and nature and its cyclic rhythms, that I don't know, I feel like them identifying people are more comfortable with the idea of death than masculinity, because the masculine nature is to basically live and like propel itself into the future and live forever and like conquer and lead. And so I wonder if that's just an overly masculine versus overly feminine thing, or and that's an imbalance in and of itself. Um,
Well, it kind of reminds me too of like Freemasons and different mystery schools where you had like the ones that were really focused on the the more like literal material climb to power, like what you're talking about with the masculine, and then you had the schools of thought that were more esoteric and about more of like the soul's evolution and peace, love, and compassion and raising the consciousness, because there's so many different esoteric schools that are kind of focused on different forms of how to utilize those energies. So it makes sense when he says like that there's, certain things to kind of hide it from the wrong people, but you could see each group having their views of who the wrong person is though.
yeah,
Like I think about our government and that just because it's all masculine, they were all Freemasons, and it was super like exclusatory. Like they were studying all this stuff, but there was a very large intention to keep it masculine and white, so I feel like, and there are, all of those politicians are still in those organizations, like those, they're studying this stuff, but it's like, are they trying to, like, there's so many of them that will say that they don't believe in any of the woo part, you know what I mean? They just want to do the power part or the money part. So
yeah,
probably just depends on like what school of thought you were in when you were studying this stuff. Like which Freemason organization were you a part of? Like which one was Nicholas Flamel a part of? Was he a Rosicrucian? Maybe, but maybe more interested in being wealthy and
yeah.
exploring the world.
Can you just explain really quick, like really super quick, who he is? Because we didn't do that yet.
Oh, yeah. Let me just find it in the book and I'll read it.
Just super quick, though. Like, who is this guy? It's in page, I think, 3.
Or 2.
Yeah.
I just had it and then I closed it and I'm annoyed because it was open.
Okay, no, it's before that. I just want to do, okay.
Oh, I found it.
He was considered one of the greatest physicians of all time. He was a physician. Oh no, that's Paracelsus.
He's a notary. So he was a Paris notary by the name of Nicolas Flamel, became one of the most celebrated of all Western alchemists. His transformation began in 1357 when he acquired a strange alchemy book written by Abraham Elazar, a wandering Jewish alchemist who wrote at least one other book, the Book of Hieroglyphics, which is what you read this. Sorry, what?
I read this already.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to chapter 19. And we're running out of time and there's a lot of information, so I want to just like scoot through this chapter and I'll share the screen. So the caduceus. We start out with talking about the caduceus, what it is, where it comes from, the myth of it. And the myth of this is the caduceus. We've all seen it. We know what it means. In Western medicine, it is the emblem for, I don't know, medicine in general. But it's much more than that. And there's a strong connection to alchemy. And there's a myth of the caduceus that dates back to ancient Grecian times with their mythology. Who's this person? Tiresias, who was an oracle of the king Oedipus, and he started out a man. He was walking down the street one day, saw these two serpents coiled up together. Again, this is another instance of multiple stories of the myth. The book says that he happened upon those two snakes and he tried to untangle them, and then they turned him into a woman. Other stories on the internet will say that he hit the snakes, and then because he hit them, they cursed him into being a woman. And so that's fun. Like, you're cursed, so you're turned into a woman. Sorry, being a woman is a curse, essentially. And so there's various different stories on this whole entire myth and it's of itself, and I think it's packed with symbolism just for the fact that we have basically a hermaphrodite, someone who is a man, turns into a woman, lives as a woman for 7 years, which is our magic number that we go into in chapter 19. And then the curse is lifted when he finds two coiled snakes again, or she finds two coiled snakes again, and then does the same motion. The whole motion part is very unclear to me. So if anyone knows, write it in the comments. But some say that she whacked the snakes again, or she tried to untangle them once more, and then they turned her back into a man. And then when he turned back into a man, who was arguing? These two gods were arguing over who has better sex, men or women. And the goddess, I really want to look this up.
It was Zeus and Hera.
Zeus and Hera. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so Zeus and Hera were arguing about who has better sex or has more pleasure, and then they asked Tiresias, because I'm calling it a they now, they had lived in both man and woman's shoes, and they said men for sure have more pleasure, and then Hera didn't like that answer.
It was women.
Oh no, women, yeah, sorry. They said women have more pleasure. Hera didn't like that answer because she thought men had more pleasure. And so then she blinded Tiresias, and Tiresias became known as the blind prophet or the blind oracle. And the coiled snakes is an image that may be associated with the caduceus in Greek mythology. That's what's being suggested in chapter 19. So the caduceus the parts of this is we have the bottom part of the staff, which should have a little ball at the end or something that indicates that it's connected to Earth. But this is the base of where the energy begins, and it's Earth. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have the one snake, which represents sulfur, and the other snake, which represents mercury. And then the staff itself, which represents salt. And then the wings, and then we have the elements in this symbolism as well. So the wings represent air. The golden circle at the top represents the sun, or is considered the solar disk. And then water is supposed to be hidden. It's the hidden power of the staff. And I found this really fun image of the caduceus as a beefy woman, and I thought that was just like
crystals on the bottom. That's so
cool. I know. I just thought that was fun. Another just simple depiction of the caduceus. And then this is the image that they have in the book that they talk about. They break down each of these different symbols. So this part, this is the symbol for sulfur. It should jump out at you at this point. It has the phoenix inside, which represents being reborn. Up here we have Gemini, Taurus, and Aries, which represents spring. And in the book, Dennis says that springtime is supposed to be the time when we're able to connect more strongly with the regenerative process of alchemy. And so springtime would be one of the best times to do alchemy work or ritual work. And then at the bottom we have 1, 2, 3 cauldrons where the fire begins underneath the earth. This is the first cauldron. Let's see, where do I say? Okay. Yeah, so this is the first cauldron, which we talked about in chapter 18. I don't think it's directly related, but with the crucibles, the lowest cauldron would be calcination and dissolution. The middle would be fermentation, and then the, yeah, I guess that doesn't really match. So it's not the crucibles. This is just the 3 parts of fire transformation, and then the evaporated vapors going up to unlock the caduceus. And then the 2 crowns is the first crowned point of our transformation, when we were drawing our higher self portraits. When we had overcome a certain level of bodily attachment and physical attachment, and then we burn it all and then became reborn as the phoenix, where we then experience coagulation, which is in the crown chakra, the top part of the chakra. The sun and the moon are on the left and the right. It looks like they're beaming down their energies to help with this transformative process. I didn't, let's see. Yeah, this all is written down in the book. I think it's around page, 313. It's all highly explained. And then we get into the ladder that they speak of, which is associated with the planets and their planetary metals that they are connected to. So Saturn is equal to lead, Jupiter is tin, Mars is iron, Venus is copper, Mercury is mercury, the moon is silver, and the sun is gold. There's 7 planets, 7 chakras, 7 metals, 7 days of the week, 7 steps of transformation. This number 7 is very near and dear to our earthly hearts because it represents the 7 manifestations of our being within us and who we are. And so they call this a ladder. And what's interesting is that there's 7 gates to this ladder, and there's also an 8th gate on top of that ladder. And Saturn is the top part of the gate because we have to manifest through Saturn all the way down into the planets, into the sun, in order to be, I guess, manifest as a human being. And then we go back up that ladder in order to go back into the cosmic realms. Let's see if I have a good depiction. Here's all the planets with their elements or their metals that they're connected to, and the the esoteric symbol for them. So they're also associated with the days of the week, of course, and this is the alchemical setup for the planets and days of the week. So 2 thoughts that he brings up is Atman, Atman, AT-man. Atman is the female soul essence at the base of the spine, and Brahman is the male spirit at the top of the spine. So the top of the spine and the bottom of the spine house our lower and parts of our upper triangle and the chakras. And then he explains the chakras in their relationship to the planets and the metals. So the root chakra, the lowest chakra, is connected to Saturn. And it is, of course, we are familiar with Saturn and its operation, but it's like father of time. It's at the base of the spine. It's where the coiled snake lives. And what's interesting about that whole concept is the fact that I was reading Kundalini and astrology, and it's common now. It's not like this person came up with this idea, but that when Kundalini energy rises within us, it is because we have unlocked the lessons of Saturn that allow us to transcend the lower realms of the body, which would be the personal planets. And then in order to go beyond Saturn's, I guess, restrictive hold on us in the lower realm of Malkuth, we have to go through Chiron, which is the wounded healer. So then we have to heal all the wounds that we've acquired on the earthly plane through Saturn's lessons. And Saturn is the Lord of Karma. And so we have to go through the Lord of Karma, Saturn. What other name comes up when you think of Saturn? In order to unlock our divinity and go beyond to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So that's the root. And what's interesting about the fact that Saturn is at the root versus at the top reversed is that there's this interesting kind of reversal in the human energy grid where, I mean, if you look at the Kabbalah tree of life, the head is actually at the bottom and the roots are actually at the top. And it's similar to how the biology of a real tree actually functions, where the brain of the tree is rooted into the ground. And then I guess you could say its sexual organs are its flowers that are actually the higher part of its existence. And so that's the way I think of the energy systems, is with this process that they explain, because Saturn is the farthest planet from us in the with these 7 planets that we're talking about, but yet it's at the root, which is the bottom. But we have to go through Saturn, and then we have to go to through Jupiter, and then we have to go through Mars, and then we have to go through Venus, and then Mercury, and then the moon, and then the sun to be manifest into a human being. Some believe that our souls actually travel through each of those planets before being manifested here. And then the work is to reverse that by going through the root and up into the solar plexus and out into the world. But so 10 is Jupiter, and that's the sacral chakra expansion, the genital area, joviality, fluency, root of I don't know what word I said, but it's dissolution, and it's also associated with disillusion. So the root chakra is calcination, and this is dissolution. And then iron is Mars in the solar plexus. And this may also not line up with your past beliefs or what you traditionally understand to rule the different chakras. So, but let's just go ahead and learn this as if we don't know anything, for the sake of learning this alchemical process. So the solar plexus is iron and Mars, and it's connected to separation. Iron is the second oldest metal known to humans. Chakra is the seat of the will to power control and concerns about providing for one's physical needs in the world. It's the color red, and it equals iron. What's fun about that is Mars is red because of the amount of oxidization to the element iron that's going on that planet. And it's connected to blood, and we have iron in our blood. Venus is copper and is right here in the heart chakra. This is where we marry the upper and lower triangle. So this is the place where we learn to, which is very appropriate for Venus, right? Where we are learning about balance and harmony and polarity within the self. And that's the place where we experience conjunction, the triumph of spirit over matter, which is the symbol for Venus, the circle over the cross symbol. That's spirit over matter. Cross is matter, or matter, mother. Mercury is the throat. And I know that there's some people say Venus is in the throat, and they say the sun is at the solar plexus, but again, we're just going to read through what it's written in this book. Mercury is the throat chakra. It is connected to speech, fermentation. It's the seat of inspiration, creativity, the spoken word, thyroid and thalamus glands. Silver is the third eye up here, and that's connected to the moon, and that's distillation. That's where the pituitary gland is, our ability to concentrate and meditate, and it's allows us to experience intuition and mystical states. And then up here we have the gold crown chakra associated with the sun, and its element is salt, and it's alchemical process is coagulation. The pineal gland, the pine cone shaped appendage, embraces all colors, all senses, all functions, and is all pervading in power. Duality disappears, and one with universe is a new state of being. So that's the rundown on all of these planets. I found this really fun illustration that basically has everything in it. It has the tree of life, the Kabbalah tree of life, and the chakras, and the caduceus, and how it is linked up, and it has all of the esoteric and occult symbols. I'll add this to the email, or I'll upload it to the YouTube page so that you can look at it a little bit more in depth. It's hard to zoom in. I'll try to find a better, a more high quality version so that you can actually read all the information. So the homework assignment for us was to do the grand meditation from last week. I don't think we're going to discuss that today because we're running out of time. But the homework assignment for next meetup in 2 weeks is to do a fire breathing visualization meditation. I don't remember where it is exactly, but I'm pretty sure in chapter 20, he talks about this process of the inhalation and exhalation process, which creates the combustion in our root to create the flow, the energy flow within us. And I just really got inspired by the visualization of the fact that every single time you inhale, there's combustion happening. There's calcination happening. When you inhale, the oxygen meets what is it? Let me read really quick. It meets the iron molecule, hemoglobin, inside of the blood, and then the oxygen binds to that and then gets dispersed throughout the body. And then when you exhale, you're exhaling the carbon dioxide, which is the remains of that combustion that happened inside. So I like also the whole process of blowing on a flame to make it larger. I think just that subtle dance between the amount of air flow and the fire flame igniting and lighting up will give you a really good visualization of the internal action of combustion within. And so in the beginning of the book club, we started some of our rituals with the breath of fire. And it was a little too intense for some people, but I think that we should really try to remember or go back to that breath of fire and do this visualization where you're staring into a flame. Don't get too close, because when you inhale, I don't want you to be inhaling the smoke or the fumes that are being let out by the flame, but just far enough where you're not fully engulfed in the flame. But so every time you inhale, visualize the air going down into your body, and when it gets all the way down to the very bottom, to the root chakra, see that fire igniting inside of you, and then exhaling that air onto the flame in your cauldron to see it jump while you exhale. So do this process, for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you feel compelled to do that for. Again, be really careful with not inhaling fumes. I don't want people to be passing out because of this. So, like a good example, what I would do is I would just put some herbs or things, paper, maybe some wood pieces that actually hold the flame into a very flammable, safe container. And when it gets to a certain level, just keep breathing in and out and just watch the flame, how it goes, how it dances with your breath, how it's synonymous with you, how it's reacting to you as well. And when it dies down too, when you blow on it, the coal is getting reignited, and what kind of senses are being drawn into your existence with that practice. And then we're gonna read chapters 19, 20, and 21. We only have 2 meetings left. So the next time we meet, we're gonna go over 19, 20, and 21. And then the next time after that, it'll be the last meeting, and it'll be the last 3 chapters. And then we'll break for winter and come back in January to pick up with the 4th book. So yeah, we're winding down, up. I don't know. We're almost done though, which is pretty amazing. Right? We've gotten to, oh no, I'm sorry, did I say 19, 20, 21?
Yeah, I think you mean 20, 21, 22, right?
Yeah, I do. And you're going to really like these chapters because he talks about tarot and numerology and the connection between the two in alchemy. And so we're getting into the fun, like juicy, intellectual stuff.
Yay.
So yeah, 2021 and 22 meet on September 3rd or October 3rd. It'll be October at that time. And we'll meet at the same place, same time. And the video will be uploaded at my discretion whenever I feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Says the true Libra.
Yes, right. Your North Node in Aries.
I add just one last little thing since the chapter 19, even though I failed to read it because I got our homework wrong. I was sifting through it. Since the breath of fire is the next homework, and that chapter had a lot to do with Kundalini, just some extra credit homework if anybody is curious who hasn't done any Kundalini yoga. There's this series on Gaia, the channel on Amazon, that has beginner yoga classes or beginner Kundalini yoga classes. It's a 5-class series. And if you have Gaia or Amazon Prime, it's on there, and they teach you the correct way to do breath of fire. If you feel like you want to expand your Kundalini practice at all, and they tell you how to like hold your root chakra, specifically the Mullabandha, and they make you do this like crazy thing with your arms while you squeeze your anus really tight and you're like breathing the breath of fire. But I actually do that yoga series when I'm really angry, when he talks about the fire humor being out of balance and you're like angry and upset and having all that, or even my like the water one being out of balance. Like when I've done that Gaia series, Kundalini yoga, it activates the lymphatic system, so it clears out all of your phlegm or your sinuses if you're having like that congestion buildup, and then it also releases anger and it realigns your vibrational frequency so that you're not in that imbalance anymore. And every time I'm mad or upset and I do it, I feel totally better afterwards. It's crazy. My whole lymphatic system is like cleared out. It's super cool. So I highly recommend it. I think they're like 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So if anybody's watching it, yeah. And it kind of feels like the alchemical process described in that like experience, like that 45-minute experience feels like you're working through some kind of system in your body like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, visualize your body like a cauldron, like the image that we had on the screen from page 313 of the 3 pits of fire, and then the caduceus, and then the crowns, and then the phoenix and sulfur, and then the crown at the top. Like, just try to visualize that, and while you're doing, you know, any sort of meditation work. But yeah, that was the visualization meditation. Also, there's a little quiz in chapter 20 that you will do, and then we'll talk about that, the results from there. And yeah, so good meeting, guys.
Close, home run.
I know. It's like, look at this book.
I know.
Thick.
I'm just glad we took this long to read it, because I honestly feel like this book could have been one of those books that you plow through really fast and go, well, that was really fun and interesting, but you don't really actually, like, there's a difference, right, between knowing versus experiencing. And I feel like the cool thing about this book club was I feel like we really experienced this book, not just read it. And it's synced up with the astrology of the book too in a very magical way. So I'm really stoked that we read this, and it makes me really excited for the future books that we read. What else is gonna happen?
I know. Okay. Yeah, we'll have the 4th book reveal later, because you'll have plenty of time to get it. And I just want to create a little suspense, I think. Okay. Well, great book club. Great seeing you too, Anna. And we'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Talk soon.